Good evening. This is John Bailey, and this is People to be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. Tonight is the night of an important fundraiser for April's Child, a Westchester organization dedicated to a problem that few persons want to discuss or talk about among themselves: child abuse. Tonight, you've got Laura Schwartz, Executive Director of April's Child since 1997, to tell us about it. First, welcome to the program.
Thank you,
Ms.
John.
Schwartz, and on the occasion of your fundraiser, we'll talk about that a little later. But I wanted to explore with you, tell us about what does April's Child in White Plains provide for couples or parents and children encountering such issues.
Thank you. Well, as we know, parenting is a very, very tough job. It's something that we get no instruction on, we get no support, we just have a child, we have no choices what we have. And many people don't have the supports that they need. So, I don't really like to think about child abuse as an entirety, because as parents, people don't want to hurt their children. Mostly what happens is people don't understand what parenting is or how to parent correctly, or they parent the way they were parenting. So what we do is we provide a very specialized service where we send community volunteers into the home. We train them and we supervise them, and they go into the home of a family that's having stress, that's at risk of perhaps abuse, and they go in and they work with the parents directly in the home, in the environment, to try to help them look at what some of their joys and struggles in parenting are, and how to best help the parents provide a safe, happy, healthy environment for their children by helping them look at their joys, their struggles, what they do well, what they would like to do differently. So it's really, it's not only a success to the parent. We have over 90% success rate working with families in stress, but it's also a success for the volunteer, for the community who's working with that family.
Now, how do you get your referrals?
Well, we get referrals from the community. People themselves refer to us when they learn about us, schools, clinics, doctors, neighbors, preschools. Anybody who knows about us can make a referral. It's called a friendly referral, which means the parents have to know that they're referring. And
you won't take a referral and just call a parent.
Not blindly, right.
I see. And if persons wanted to come to you, discreetly, how do they do that? In other words, advice on how to convince a parent who may be possibly not doing the right things, could be persuaded to come.
Right. Well, there are several ways. One is we actually have what we call the Parent Helpline. The Parent Helpline, which the number is 682-CARE, C-A-R-E, which is 682-2273, and that's available 24/7. So somebody can call the helpline themselves and ask for support and help, or just ask a question or information and referral. Also, people can call our regular number, our office number, which is 997-2642, and they can just talk to somebody and ask the questions and find out.
Explore in general the problem.
Exactly. And, we have gotten calls. For example, somebody might call and say, I just had a fight with my child. I want to hit them, but I don't want to hit them. What can I do? And a trained counselor will talk to them and help them think about it. And through that might become a friendly referral that the person might say, you know what? Maybe somebody can come to my house. And because we're coming to their houses and we're coming in our own cars and in our own clothes, we're not looking like we're from the government or something. It is friendly. It's not threatening, because nobody knows when I knock on the door that I'm there to help. I'm just a friend.
I see. Now, do you get involved before or after law enforcement gets involved?
Both.
Both. How does that work?
So sometimes a family, as we just discussed, will come through different sources and they haven't been involved. Sometimes, however, a family does get involved with law enforcement or the Department of Social Service, CPS, and then we'll get a referral and work with the family to hope stops further abuse or difficulties.
I see. And the police, do you get a lot of police referrals?
We don't get a lot of police referrals.
No.
And that's a really good idea, John. Thanks for the suggestion, is that maybe we need to develop that relationship more with the police so they know that we're here and able to provide those services.
I see. Now, how many families and parents do you help a year?
Well, in the past number of years, we've directly, when we go into the home, we work with 150 families which is comprised of about, 325 children. But we also serve families in different ways. We run parenting groups sometimes in different places, so we have groups of families we help that way. We do community education and outreach. One of the things we do, for example, I know we're having a great fundraiser tonight with chefs, local chefs, but in April, which is Child Abuse Prevention Month, we do a big walkathon where we get people in and we educate people. Not only do they walk and support the cause, but we educate the community, and there's an awareness about how to help families.
Any regular seminars?
We don't do regular seminars, but we go anywhere we're invited. We do corporate seminars.
And they should contact you at 997-2642 if any organization has an idea for a program. Now, what are the most common forms of child abuse that you see?
Well, that's a rough question because there are...
Around town in this area.
Well, I think, the thing is that child abuse is invasive, pervasive, and it's all over. So what kinds of child abuse are there and do we see? The most common and the least recognized, actually, is emotional abuse. And the reason emotional abuse is not really recognized is because when you're yelling at somebody, people don't always consider that abuse. Now, I do want to say that abuse is chronic and repetitive. We're all guilty of yelling at our children sometimes, or saying something inappropriate or harsh in a moment of anger. That's not actual abuse. The abuse is the ongoing yelling, degrading, comparing, and then there's nagging. There's neglect, which is not showing the love, not giving the support, isolation, those kind of things. So emotional abuse is really tough because we're all guilty of it to some degree, in some sense, and that's painful to us as people, as parents. But it's really the insidious, ongoing, repetitive nature that hurts the children and chips away at their self-esteem.
Are victims usually very young, teenagers? 7 to 10?
The most common group that's abused actually is the younger. Infants to toddlers are the most abused population. That doesn't mean it doesn't go on in other populations. Teens are always a funny thing. You kind of asked about that because teens are difficult beings. Yes. And so it does sometimes lead to things that look like or may feel like child abuse. I know I just mentioned emotional abuse, but there are other abuses, including physical abuse, which is, as we know, the hurting of a child in many, many different ways we can't even imagine, or ways we do imagine, a slap, a hit. And, a lot of people say, when I was raised, my parents hit me, and look how good I was raised. I came out. I turned out to be. But the real reality of that is you may be lucky, but what does hitting really teach a child? It teaches them fear. What we want to teach, what all of us as parents want to teach a child, for a child to be healthy and grow up wonderful, is self-discipline. How do they learn to know their behavior is wrong instead of reacting in fear at a possible smack or hit? Of course, there's sexual abuse, which affects all generations in a family, and there are all sorts of neglect, and that cross all kinds of educational neglect, hygiene, medical, and those things. So the scope of abuse is quite large, and we often see little pieces of neglect of all the abuses in families rather than just one, but you do see just one. Is
child abuse on the increase or the decrease today?
That's a tough question. There are more reports. In Westchester County, we get about 7,000 reports a year of suspected abuse and neglect, and about a third of them are what they call founded, need more investigation. The thing that makes it hard to know if it's on the increase or if it's stable or if even decreasing is that it's more talked about these days. And once things are more talked about, people are more aware of them. So I think for many years, as you said at the very beginning, John, that child abuse is something people don't want to talk about. So it may be happening and people didn't know. And I think it's becoming more to the forefront, so it may mirror or look like an increase in abuse.
I see. So the jury is out whether it's more or less. 7,000 sounds like a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
But we have to remember in those 7,000, you get a lot of false reports, I guess, is what you want to call them. You get people
Somebody
who call
calling about something they saw on the street.
something they call in the street. Sometimes divorces, they get vicious, and a husband or wife may call on each other because they want custody, or or neighbors are angry at each other, and so they call. Or somebody hears a crying child and doesn't understand that child has colic or maybe ill, or the parents doing the best they can, and they report it as that the child's not taken care of.
Does divorce foment abuse?
I don't think it foments abuse, but I do think that, in a sense, it brings it more to the forefront because the courts demand kind of strict things to get custody. So in order to get custody, somebody may say, well, my spouse is hitting my child, that way I should have custody. Also, as we know, stress is something that can cause abuse. If a parent is stressed over something, they may act out, and the child may be the victim because they're there. So, yes, divorce can create more stress in somebody's life, therefore creating the potential of abuse.
Okay, now we're talking with Laura Schwartz, Executive Director of April's Child, which is an organization recently changed your name, which deals in helping parents put a stop to their child abusive behavior. And so what I'd like...
Can we talk about the name change for a quick second?
Okay.
I'd like to say for 32 years, we were known as the Child Abuse Prevention Center of New York. And what we found was that that's a difficult, as you said at the beginning, it's a difficult topic to talk about child abuse. And nobody wants to think of themselves as an abusive parent. And we realized what we really do is we help strengthen families and we help strengthen parents and children. And so, in a sense, the name Child Abuse Prevention Center wasn't really accurate. And of course, parents wouldn't want the service because who wants service from the child abuse people? So when we looked at it, we really came up that April is Child Abuse Awareness Month, so all our children are April's child. And also that April represents new beginnings and growth, and that's really what we see this program as, an opportunity for families to grow and to strengthen, and a much more positive message because families want to love each other.
Yeah, and if you're going to get help, you can't change repetitive behavior.
Exactly.
Right. Now, tell us about your staff. How do they work with the individual? How many times do you see them?
Well, we're a really spectacular staff in a way because we have a very small paid staff, but we have a large volunteer staff. So right now there are 4 employees. We're a very small organization, but we have 100 volunteers who do all sorts of things to help families. So the main program is this parent aid program where we go into the home. So what happens is a staff, a volunteer, or even a social work graduate student intern goes into the home once a week for an hour, and they work directly with the family to help them look at their behaviors and look at how they can do different things differently. One of the things about us is we know, like all of us know, nobody wants to be told what to do or that what you're doing is wrong. So what we try to help people look at is what is going on for them. We're non-judgmental. We don't tell people. We help them explore different ways of looking at a problem and different ways of perhaps doing things so that they can start to change their own behavior.
Yeah. Now, how did you personally get involved in this field?
I'm a social worker by training. I had actually many years ago decided that I wanted to be a medical social worker, and I worked in hospitals and nursing homes. And when I moved to Westchester County, I needed a job, and I came to this agency, and I was a little reticent because I felt that I didn't like home visits. Going into somebody's home was uncomfortable for me. But after working with a family, the first family I worked with for a year, and I realized the power of the work and the power of home intervention, it became a mission instead of a job. So, I have been here 23 years this week, and it's really just the reward I get from watching a family make those changes, and the reward the family gets from providing a great environment for their children makes all the difference in the world.
Now, if we have some young persons watching who want to get involved in this kind of field, how should they prepare?
Well, I think there are a lot of ways. I can't enough say volunteer, 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 whether it be here or somewhere else, but get the experience. What is it like working with people? What is it that makes you, that turns you on about it, that captures your attention? The reason I did go into the field was I spent a summer working at a health center in Manhattan with and I making appointments, just an appointment clerk. But what happened is, as the elderly and the lonely would come to make an appointment, they would spend time with me, telling a joke, asking a question, and I realized that I could make a difference in these people's lives, and that's what drew me to social work. So I really think if somebody's interested in the field, find a place that you can do something and learn, is this really what's your future?
Now, getting back to April's child's work, what are some of your success stories that you can point to?
Oh, wow, there's so many. Let's quickly think. Well, we worked with a family last year who lived in public housing. It was a mom with 2 children, 2 very active young boys, and she lived in public housing in Yonkers. And there were a couple of things that went on for her. She was having trouble keeping a job because the boys needed her so much. So every time she would get a job, the school would call and she'd have to come home and she'd lose the job because she, wasn't being reliable. And one of the things we really noticed in the home when we went in was that there was no furniture. They were living really, bare mattresses on the floor and a table with a TV.
Wow.
And so some of the things we were able to do with them, one of the things is we were able to get furniture donated for them. Mm-hmm. And what was so special about that was it was in November, and the mom was able to have her first ever Thanksgiving in her own home at her own table. She was able to start sitting every night and having dinner together as a family. She was able to get a job and keep it. And one of the things that happened with her self-esteem, she stopped yelling at the boys as much. She was hitting them at one point. Once she was feeling better about herself, which was both the environment and her ability to work and bring in enough money, she was then able to provide a much happier, safer home for her children. And it really, at the end, it was just so marvelous to see this happy family functioning beautifully together. Not that they didn't have fights, because families argue, but it became a different kind of argument.
Right. Now, you mentioned at the top of the interview that you feel that parents and parents-to-be need to be better prepared for parenthood. What are we lacking?
Well, I think one of the things is that, I always kind of compare, in a sense, having a baby to buying a car. When you buy a car, you pick how much money you want to spend.
Very good.
Right? You pick the color of the car. You pick all the features you want. Yeah. And then when you actually get it, the salesman takes you into the car and shows you how everything works. Mm-hmm. When you have a baby, you don't know what gender you're getting most of the time, although I know some people are choosing now, but you don't know the gender, you don't know the hair color, you don't know the features, you don't know will they be healthy, not healthy. You know nothing. Mm-hmm. And then you're sent home with a baby.
All yours.
Without a manual.
Yeah.
Right, without a manual. Yeah. So I think one of the things is we as a community can support each other. I would like, in some sense, to see our program go out of business because people are getting the support they need. But that's not too likely. But I think the answer is, how do we as community offer people stress relief, offer people, techniques? You're home alone. You can picture a single mom, let's say, home alone with a baby crying and crying. what does she do? Because she's getting upset, right? She may not be sleeping, or
She feels inadequate.
Exactly.
And that is a symptomatic of every time that you really don't have an answer, or like even when I make a misjudgment in a story, for example, I beat myself up over it, but it's even more telling when you're dealing with this new human being.
Right.
Or it should be,
Right.
It should be. And
right.
So anyway, enough about me. But anyway, so do you feel the education establishment is just not preparing kids for this type of challenge of life?
I think there could be more done in the schools to prepare children, but very frequently, I'm sure you know this, John, like all of us know, is until you experience something, you don't really understand what it's like.
Nobody prepares you adequately enough.
Right.
It's always a big surprise, particularly, the possibilities of having a child who's disabled, a child who has a condition, or whatever. And that's really tough.
Right.
Nobody talks about that downside at all.
You asked before what population gets most abused, and I will say that children with disabilities or problems are more likely to be abused.
Did not know that.
And so, you're really looking at how do we, again, as a community, support parents? Programs perhaps when children are born in the hospital. They've gotten better, and we have gotten better as a society in terms of now we offer, when children are born in the hospital, education on shaken baby. So that has really helped prevent shaken baby, because we're educating families as they're born. But what about having family visitors visiting every new parent, helping look at what their struggles are and not? As a society, that would be taking everybody in our arms and nurturing.
I'm not criticizing, but social work in a hospital is rudimentary at best.
Yes. They
just have so many people to see, and that, I believe, could be dramatically improved. Yeah. But that's just my personal opinion. Now, you had a fundraiser the evening that this show is being telecast over at the Harbor House in Tarrytown. And now, what do you expect to do with this fundraiser? And also, what are the challenges facing April's Child?
Okay, well, let's start with the fundraiser. Yeah. Our fundraisers do two things. One is they're actually a community education piece. Who knows about us? How do we get out to the community?
You have been watching Laura Schwartz, Executive Director of April's Child. And Laura Schwartz, you have been heard. April's Child may be contacted for information and details about how the organization can help with possible child abuse issues and strategies, or advice on how you can help someone you know is having these possible issues, by calling 914-997-2642. 914-997-2642, or if you have an urgent matter involving possible child abuse issues, contact the April's Child Hotline at any time to contact a counselor. The number of the hotline is 914-682-CARE. That's 914-682-CARE 2273. Law enforcement organizations wishing to reach out to April's Child as a resource may contact Ms. Schwartz at 914-997-2642. If you would like to contribute or volunteer for April's Child, contact 914-997-2642. This is John Bailey speaking for People to be Heard. Good night.